Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. I hope that you're having a great day. Thanks for hanging on with us. It's been a long day, but so much information. The beat goes on, and we hope that you are still moving strong on and on. Despite our virtual format, we're here committed to the work we do. So just a couple of housekeeping reminders before we get started. You can always visit the MACAE website for important updates and information. Check out our monthly membership check-ins as well. And then don't forget that tonight we have our virtual Family Feud event. We surveyed 100 MACAE members and you won't believe the answers. No team, no worries, just log in and we'll guide you. So we will continue on tonight. The recordings from today and all the presentation materials will be made available to you. Don't forget to check your email for the link to the sketch validation form if you need sketches. Do it at the end of the Institute. So if today's the only day that you're attending, you can submit it today. If you are also attending tomorrow, please wait and send it at the end of the day tomorrow. And also we encourage you to be on camera so we can create a community of learning. And also if you have questions, you can put them into the chat. And please stay muted unless you're presenting or asking a question. With that, I would like to introduce Mariah Shafer and her presentation about helping refugees.
Thank you so much, Whitney. And thank you all for being here. It's really nice to scroll through the list and see so many people are sticking it out at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on St. Patrick's Day. So I appreciate you very much. When I go through this presentation here today, I think like Whitney mentioned, if you have any questions, feel free to shoot them in the chat. I'm happy to stop and address anything that might be relevant. I also want to make sure that you know how to reach the RDC, or more specifically myself. And so at the end of the presentation, my email is also there, although I'm sure that MACAE will share that with you as well. You know, I imagine that you're all here and you're continuing to be here because you have an interest. You're either working with newcomers or refugees, you've heard about what's going on, but there's something that makes this topic stick out to you. And so as always, when I am teaching or presenting, I want you to know that I am aware that this is for you more so than it is for me. So, you know, when we go through these conversations, if you have ideas or even countering opinions on anything, we are 100% open to the dialogue and conversation about this. I just think every time I get to hear from somebody, I learn something that's helpful. So we are the Refugee Development Center. We're located in Lansing, Michigan. We started in 2002 as a response to some needs in the community. So today I'm going to talk about that a little bit, introduce us. I'm also going to give you just an overview of refugee resettlement, talk a little bit about the newcomer arrivals today, mostly because that has been an area that people continue to contact us about. They have lots of inquiry and questions about who's coming and why they're coming and what does this mean. And then I'll talk about educational practices and also a little bit of planning for the future. And I will ask you questions along the way. You don't have to formally respond. It's just kind of for us to think about. You're welcome to as we go through. And also I've included pictures in this presentation from our programs, just to kind of highlight some of the work that we're doing and what we mean when we talk about student-centered. So I want to make sure you can see that. Okay, here we go. All right. So we've been around since 2002, but we changed our mission statement a few years back. And, you know, like any organization, we have evolved and changed. So we wanted to make sure that our mission statement really represented what we're doing today. And so the vocabulary and the word choice in here was really important to us. And we sat around and thought about it for a long time. But really, when we think about working with the community, it's not top down, as you all know. It's really about working with the people that are here and listening to ideas and helping to kind of, as you're growing a plant, we want to cultivate and make room for other things to grow. And isn't that a fun thing to think about in springtime? Yes, it is. So we want to help things grow, and we want to make sure that at the heart of our being, we are open to listening to others, and that we are always changing in a way that best suits the needs of the community. So we believe in and we practice the idea to listen with more than your ears. So we really believe that as educators and partners and neighbors, that listening can take time, and it can be done in more than words. You know, it's actions. As a teacher, you know, it's drawings and facial expressions and body language and all of those things. But it's important to think about the big picture always and think about being holistically. So to give you kind of an overview of who we are and what we do today, we are in a lot of different areas because we're a small organization. You know, when we started out, it was a couple of people in a Vista, and today we have 25 people, which to us is a lot, plus a bunch of volunteers. So when we started out in 2002, it was in response to St. Vincent Refugee Services, which is the resettlement agency in the area. They had just welcomed in a bunch of the Lost Boys of Sudan. So at that time, the acting director of that program realized that there's a gap, and he connected with a local pastor named David Thiel, who was also seeing a lot of newcomers show up at their place of worship. And they said, you know, what can we do in the community to provide an extension of services, to meet people where they are? And that's how the RDC was born. And it, you know, it was a little bit here and a little bit there. And then some of the programs became more established. The drop-in center, English classes, and then in 2008, it became an official 501c3. Now, one of the reasons I'm telling you this is because it all kind of relates to how we believe in working with the community and our newcomers, and I'm sure that it feels the same way to you as well. When Vincent Delgado at the time, who was the acting director, was meeting with Pastor Thiel, they realized that English was a big piece of this puzzle, but it wasn't the only one. It was, you know, a means of getting to where people needed to go. And then they also, as they continued to grow and work with the community, saw that it really was best practice to listen to the people that you're serving and you're working with, instead of assuming that you know and then creating programs based on that. So when the youth were saying, you know, hi, I need help with homework, I need someone to tutor, I don't understand what's happening in my class, that was kind of student directed. And so Vincent Delgado at the time sat with the kids and said, okay, you know, you want a program, what does that look like? What do you think that might mean? And so then working with the school district, they created our after school program at Eastern High School. And that since, you know, has grown and changed and evolved, but I think those principles we still kind of act on today. Although, you know, from working in the communities for a while, you can see the gaps, you can identify, but it's always best to talk to the people you're working with and who are, you know, potentially, you know, going through hard times because of those gaps. So just quickly before I go into this overview, I wanted to talk about a few terms here. How many of you, is there anyone who's familiar with these terms, forced migration, in comparison to a migrant or an immigrant, refugee, and asylee? They're similar, but they all are different as well. Now, the reason I bring these up is mostly because terminology is important. The reason we use language is important. It means different things to different people. So if we're talking about forced migration, we're talking about all of the people around the globe who have had to flee. It could be because of environmental issues. It could be because of war. It could be because of many different things. So they flee, and they're considered to be part of this forced migration. it's not an official term. There's no document that gets signed. There's no paper that with a check mark on it. It's a term that's used more and more to help explain the big picture. Migrant is also a big picture kind of word. Migrant means somebody who's moved. It could have been for a new job. It could have been for an opportunity in another country. They're just moving around in the community. Immigrant means that they have officially moved to another country. Okay, so that's immigration. They're moving to another country. So migrant might just mean that they're moving within their country. Maybe they're moving around. Immigrant means they're moving to a different country. Refugee, now refugee is a very different term, but it's used broadly, frequently, all over the news. I hear it every day. And it makes sense why they're using it, but it's not the official definition. So I'll get to that in just a second. And then asylee also is something that people use. And those, I'll talk about the difference between refugee and asylee in just a moment. So in 1951, the UN, there wasn't a term for what it means when somebody is required to leave because they could die. They have to flee or they will likely die, and that they've been persecuted because of their race or their religion or their national origin or even their political opinion. The social group is the one that get used a lot to do with LGBTQI communities, but these are they have to be defined and they have to be proven true. So what that means is that if there was a flood in Lansing right now, which is where I'm living, if there was a terrible flood for some reason and it was not inhabitable anymore and I had to leave, that doesn't make me a refugee by the UN Convention terms. If there was an explosion in my neighborhood, a bomb went off, that doesn't make me a refugee by the UN Convention. The status refugee means that you've proven your case over and over and over again to prove that you're facing death or life, those are your decisions, and that it's targeted at you, that you can't return. So this becomes very important when you're talking about things like what's happened in Afghanistan recently, when you're talking about what's happening in Ukraine right now, because the news will talk about refugees and they'll talk about people having to flee. And that term in a looser term makes sense, but in terms of the convention, it doesn't yet, because there is hope that people will be able to return to their country. Ukrainians want to have their country, they want to return, right? So that is most of them talking in big terms here. That's the difference here between that and a refugee. A refugee, if somebody, like we have many refugees that are from Sudan, Somalia, Burma, Iraq, Syria, and they've already proven their case. So if I was in the Congo, for example, and I've had to flee because of war, I connect with the UNHCR, maybe in a camp, maybe in another way. I have to prove who I am, what I'm doing, why I was targeted, and I have to prove that with a variety of agencies before I would be given refugee status. And that would all happen in another country. And then I could be welcomed in a third country like the United States, right? Or Australia or Germany. Now, to go to the word asylee, if we were talking about asylum, as US law states, you have to be in the United States or at the border and say, I want to apply for asylum. And then you have to prove the same thing, that you've been persecuted against for race, religion, national origin, membership, social group, or political opinion. But you have to do that here. So I want to also let you know, we are a 501c3, which means that we are non-political. I don't express my own political opinions here. If you would like to have a conversation outside unofficially, I'm happy to do that. But here I'm just giving you facts, okay, as the law states, and facts that I've learned from, many, I'm not a lawyer, through my legal friends. Okay. So to give a picture of what's happening with our global crisis, this is at the end of 2020. So this is a couple of years ago. So if you take that into mind it. It doesn't include what's happened in Afghanistan, and it doesn't include what's happening in Ukraine right now. These statistics were the end of 2020. Okay, so you can see that the displacement, so this is not people who are given refugee status, this is that bigger term, but we're talking about folks in Syria, Venezuela, Afghanistan, South Sudan, Myanmar, Burma, DRC, Somalia, Sudan, Central African Republic, and Eritrea. So in a city like Lansing, or a community like Lansing, we're a free case city, so we welcome everybody. And so we have representation from all of these countries and more. And it's just a small, tiny little window of what's happening globally. Most of the people who are fleeing are women and children. Less than 1% of these people, this larger group number, will ever be resettled. Less than 1%. That's it. Most people will not. They will either stay in a second country and never get deemed refugee status, never get connected, or they'll continue to wait for destruction to reside in their country so they can return. They'll be stuck in a camp. They just won't have access. There won't be enough resettlement. So that's less than 1%. Why does this matter to you as an instructor or working with newcomers? Because it gives you a better idea of what's happening in the world and what it has taken for people to end up in your classroom. For us, it doesn't make a difference if you are a refugee or you have a different status. Although most of our grants want us to focus on refugees that have been here for a shorter period of time, we have diversified funding, so we never turn anybody away, which is really great for us, and we feel really fortunate with that, and it goes along with our mission. But it does, it is important for people to know this as you're working with your populations. What does it mean to be a refugee? And it's also important when you're listening to the news to understand exactly what they're talking about. I have a friend from Germany who works with refugees, and she was explaining to me a few years ago when Syria was seeing such a mass forced migration, such a large, fast forced migration number. She was saying, we use refugee all the time because we don't have the luxury of talking about it the way that you do in the United States. We are connected to these countries, and that is part of their migration. So we appreciate what you're saying in terms of refugee and what the UN says, but for us, in our regular terminology, these are people who are seeking a safe place, seeking safe harbor. So there you go. Just want to add that in there. So with everything that has happened in Afghanistan recently, and as politicized as things can get, I want you to know that the support for human beings, as I'm sure you know, but it comes from all over. So the first groups to really step up when we learned of the Afghan evacuation, besides the state offices, were the military who served in Afghanistan. So these are military soldiers or their family members who are behind, who said, I have friends, I have interpreters, I have colleagues, families who are there, and we want to support in any way that we can. And they raised a tremendous amount of money to help with the transitions of new folks in the community. We had grandmas who are calling, and teachers, and folks who are newcomers themselves who were hearing the stories and said, I just can't take it. I really want to help. I don't know what to do. I had a friend who had just retired from the East Lansing Police Department who was now working at LCC with a group that helps people of color stay in community college. And he organized a big food drive with his kids to support the newly arrived families. And we had survivors. There was a woman who called me from a local community, and I just happened to be in the office, which I'm rarely there anymore. And she said that her family had come. She said, I'm very old. I don't have any children. I have furniture that is barely used in my home and is taking up space. I want to donate my furniture. I want to help because when I came to this country as a little girl, my family was met with open arms and love and support. And she said, I just hope that these Afghan families are treated the same way. So I think that's our general consensus, right? So we have we have support in the community when we're talking about working with newcomers. So it's really important that we utilize that support, and we don't sell short where that might be coming from, and the people who would be willing to assist. So in the Lansing area, we have welcomed nearly 300 Afghans in the past 4 months. We're just shy of 300. And that was a lot of people after having 4 years of very few newcomers arriving here across the borders. So it was a big adjustment, and it was possible because we have a strong community here that collaborates with each other. So I think when we were planning for this, it all happened really quickly. We really wanted to say, St. Vincent Refugee Services is the resettlement agency here, and RDC has a long history of filling in gaps and providing educational support. And so when we looked at that, we found that we could be of assistance by working with the Afghan Association of Michigan. They were just getting off the ground then, and providing some background support to them, coordinating with St. Vincent Refugee Services to determine where we might be over, where we might be separate, how we can help each other. We really, in tradition, always look at the whole person or the whole family. So we just took some of these elements that we already do and amplified it. So we do home visits. All of our staff is trained and educated on how to do home visits. Our home visits are school orientation, welcome, but this time it was emergency supplies. It was more warm socks and laundry detergent and basic kind of needs, pads for women, diapers for children. We also hired staff immediately that had Dari and Pashto speaking and listening skills. They come from that community, and we have been incredibly fortunate with it. We've hired 3 folks. Just the caliber and their professionalism has been amazing. And we started doing in-person programming. So after, 2 blurry years of COVID, we said, okay, masks on, let's get out there and see what we can do. And we started doing in-person programming and then in-person English classes as well. And we did those things using some of the sites that we have had, but then also looking at new sites. So we started offering classes in different locations as well, because we really believe in looking at where the needs are and then how to break down any barriers to education and learning. So when we're thinking about the Afghans coming in, we're thinking about them in terms of individuals, so not as a group, and what their experiences are and maybe, and then knowing that English for them is not their first priority. It's not, I just want to learn English because I want to be an English professor. No, I'm learning English so I can understand what's happening in my kids' schools, get a job, get a driver's license, understand how to read a box about food or supplies. So really looking at English as being a tool and not the end result, the end goal. So to go into this a little bit more, I'm going to slow down a little bit here. Because I want you to think about what you're already doing. When I was creating this, I kept thinking, I'm going to be preaching to the choir, I think, a little bit here. And I don't want this to be something where I'm just talking at people the whole time. You all have endured, and learned so much the last few hours. I really want us to think about what you're already doing. And these are some of the things that when we reflect back on working with students, what we're looking at is, of course, learn about your students, and not just learn about, that Ali likes Ronaldo as his favorite soccer player. That's good too. That's important. It can be really good for motivation. But learn about where they're from. I remember when I first started working with a youth program, and I had all of these students who were from Burma, different parts, some were Rohingya, which I didn't even know what that meant really at the time. Some were Karen. I didn't know much about the history the tradition. And I remember they were working in tables, and I remember because I touched their heads. I just touched the top of their heads, like, oh, good job, or that looks great. And then months later was reading something about how that is really frowned upon, and that can be like you're stealing somebody's soul. And I just felt terrible. But it was so past the point I couldn't go back to a seventh grader and say, sorry, I didn't mean to steal your soul. But that would have been really helpful to know at the time. So learn about your students, learn about their culture, learn about their interests, and remember to be culturally inclusive. So if you think about what that means, and you think about what you may or may not be doing in your own class, it's a big space, and there's a lot of ways to do it. But there's a lot of ways that we make mistakes too, and I think that sometimes, and one of the points that I want to go back to with this is that we are not the main player in the classroom. The classroom doesn't exist so that we can teach, right? It doesn't exist so that we can negotiate our relationship with newcomers. It's there for them to learn how to chase their dreams, get on their feet, find some comfort and strength and stability, build that foundation, learn the language. They're not there for the tests. They're not there for your homework assignments or your agenda of 20 minutes. It's really about what is best for them. So when you think about culturally inclusive, I a couple of years ago did this lesson that I was really pleased with how it turned out. And it was after having some really good conversations with some researchers at MSU and talking about what it means to be culturally inclusive in the classroom. And I've given presentation assignments for years, and they can be really fun and really entertaining and effective. But getting students to get in their comfort zone is a hard thing. Even when you make room in a classroom for people to get to know each other, and you provide other activities where they can meet outside of class and go to the park or do some research at the library, there's something about presenting that is intimidating. So I told them, we're going to do you're going to do two presentations. And they were like, oh. And I said, and these were adults, I said, don't worry, it's okay. It's about something you like and you're interested in. We're going to do food, and you're going to give a presentation on your food, how to make it. You're going to make a poster, and then we're going to have a potluck. Obviously, this was, before COVID. We're going to have a potluck together and have a little party. And they're like, great, great, great. But what about the two presentations? I said, well, I'm kind of curious, and I have a theory. I want us to, we had our grading rubrics, and it was very simplified for the students and all positive. But I said, we're going to have two for each of the students who are watching, and you are going to give the same presentation one time in a language that you choose, you feel comfortable in, and the second time you're going to give it in English. And I just want, as a class, for us to watch and then give you some comments back. Oh, it was the best assignment in my whole experience teaching I have ever done, because they realized it. As they were sitting there feeling confident with their language, I said, now, this is the difference between your fluency and your ability in English and your confidence. So when you're as a presenter, you're doing just fine if it's in your favorite language, the language you're most comfortable with. But if you are doing it in English, you get nervous, and then all of it falls apart. So it was really fun, and people were able to speak and hear each other's languages, and a few of them spoke the same one, and they would laugh. It just was beautiful. And the food was amazing, and I'm sad that we haven't had it in 2 years. So the other part I would say is, don't assume. And this is something that I work on, and sometimes I feel like I'm good at it, and other times I'm surprised at my assumptions. But we have so many different people all the time within the same communities, and their experiences are their own. You know, I'm from Michigan. I was born in Midland. If I met somebody else who's from Michigan and born in Midland and who is also of my same faith or belief and background, we would have some things in common, but it doesn't mean we would process any of those experiences the same, or that we would learn in the same way, or find the same activities easy or difficult, or get along with, you know, Mary Jane because she's here. None of that is affected by the fact that we were both born here in Midland, right? So we just want to remember to check that. And again, remember, students are first and not you. So that means maybe take some time, which I know is very, very difficult. And if you are, you know, working in a more structured system than we are as a nonprofit, my heart goes out to you, because we have flexibility. We have, you know, end goals that we want to meet. We use CASAS or WIOA, but if you are in another kind of system, it can be much more difficult. But always try to go back to, what's your plan for your students? All right. So we talked about the multilingual classroom and activities. I don't know how all of you feel about languages being present in your classroom, and that's something I would like to ask you, but I feel like we have a pretty big group here. So maybe at the end, if we can just come back to that question, that could be helpful. I won't give you my feedback on that. I'll wait till the end until I hear your thoughts on that. Because I think the way that I was taught on best practices and the way that I have learned since then are different. And I firmly believe in one of them for most of the time. So the other thing that I think is, these are really fun ideas, but adults want to play too. Adults like structure, but they also like to play, and they have goals and objectives. But man, you know, when I think about the students that I've been working with, and students will work not just one job, but 2 jobs, or they'll be at home with their kids, and then they'll go to work at the factory, and they come to English class and they want to learn. But a couple of years ago, again, before COVID, I said, hey, I'm thinking this summer, we should maybe take some field trips without your children. And they were like, oh, what? Like, this was a dirty word, a dirty idea. I said, well, where would you want to go? And they said the zoo. Of all the places they would go without their children, they wanted to go to the zoo and see the animals. And I said, really? The zoo? And this woman, she said, well, every time I've gone with my kids, it's all about what they want to do. And I just want it to be about the animals. And I thought, okay, so if this doesn't speak to the fact that adults just want to have some fun too, you know, so make room for play in the classroom. That would be one of my tips, especially when you're talking about folks who are coming from, you know, kind of potentially could be coming from painful backgrounds. You want to have some fun in the classroom because that motivates them to come. And to balance some new teaching techniques with traditional approaches. So this one also might be controversial, but here we go. So, you know, I believe in having a lot of fun in the classroom. And I think that as I've designed my classroom, I tend to keep it pretty informal in a lot of ways. However, I have had students who really, because of their adults now and their entire background has been in teacher-fronted instruction with note-taking, very little communication by the student. You listen. And as much as that hurts my heart, I value their need for that, because their comfort is also important. So I usually try to balance out a lot of the fun, interactive, physical games, a lot of the task-based, you know, problem-solving kinds of fun, with also some instruction, with some notes or some patterns, because I think that if they perceive the activity as being valuable to them, then they will come back. But if they feel like they're just coming to play the whole time, they might not come back, even though you can say you're learning. I promise you. I promise. By pretending that you're going to the grocery store, you're learning and I can hear it. They don't believe you. So provide a little balance in that. I think that's helpful. How are we doing? You doing okay? Let me see. Anybody sleeping in here? I need to. Nobody's crying with boredom or pain. All right, we're doing all right. Okay. So let's go back. I'm hopping all around. So I think the other piece I was going to mention is to make sure that while you're teaching, you are also thinking of what the pressures that are on the students. And I think that thinking about the responsibilities, you know, we talk about this with children a lot of the structures become inverted when families come in from different countries, and the children generally learn the language more quickly, and then they become kind of the responsible party in the house and they make decisions. But this happens, you know, that inversion affects the parents also, and it affects adults as well. So if you're working with people who have children at home, it's important to think about that. And as you're developing lessons, I like to kind of slide in phrasing that is maybe the kids are using, or warning signs, things that might help lift the parents up a little bit. If I'm working with all parents, sometimes we do parent programming, we definitely address those issues, because that we talk about school and how to stay on top of school, and where do you go to look at your grades, and how do you get to a parent teacher conference, and how do you connect with your teacher, and what's acceptable and what isn't. We talk about how you can spank your children. You can spank a booty, but you can't grab an arm in public. And now I will tell you that for some of these conversations, we generally like to do that in the home with a cultural broker or somebody from the community who can better explain it. And that way it feels a lot less like I'm enforcing some kind of social constraint on you or making any judgment. It's just the reality of how things happen here. So we like to provide education that is both language-based, but also, you know, aware of the cultural differences on how to manage some of these things in our classrooms and in our home. And we also like to create opportunity for, like right now, we're providing English classes in a neighborhood that is close to a lot of our families through a partnership with a church. And we have childcare and youth teen programming and adult education at the same time. So I have a mom who came in, and she's been here for a while. She's seeking asylum, and she said, you know, I want to learn English. I'm ready. I was an attorney before I came here. And I said, welcome, come in, let's take your test. And then during the intake, I said, you know, we have the programs for the teens and the kids. Do you want to see it? And she said, sure. And I walked her through, and she just lit up. I said, well, come on, bring the kids. We've got it. And then she brought her kids. It was 4 kids. All right, great. Some teenagers and a little one. And then she brought her husband, who he had just been dropping her off, but then he must have felt left out. So he started coming in as well and joining the class. And I just thought, this is, you know, this is the ideal situation for us. It doesn't always play out that way, but that makes it possible for a whole family to attend. Now we have historically, and we still have today, we don't have that option everywhere with every location or in every, but when it's possible, that's beautiful. And we do have childcare available and early family literacy. We are trying to be aware and cognizant of the food scarcity issue. So we have partnerships with the food bank, the garden project in the area, and then we connect with them to either deliver or have available fresh produce. And we also are going to start working potentially with the food bank to have more dry foods at our class locations. that's still in the works. So with the garden project, they were out today. There's free plots in the area. We teach basic vocabulary about growing and seeds and maintenance, but we also have it available and accessible in a variety of languages so that we're not relying on just English for folks, and they feel very welcomed. And we invite organizations like that into our classes so that they see a relationship and there's a trust there, and also for the organizations to know they can come to us if there's any kinds of issues, and it just seems to work out really well. And then it's fun, you know, if you have a student who, most of our students are so much better than I am at gardening. We were doing it virtually, having the conversations virtually last year, but all of my plants were eaten by the groundhog. And I was telling my students, like, please help me. They were like, teacher, you can use this and this and this. I'm like, thank you. So it's helpful when we have these programs, because then, you know, they get to show their skills and it really becomes asset-based and just the most honest and clear way. And that again goes back to the idea that we're not, you know, up above providing education, but we're all in it together to make the community better, you know? So students as teachers and that whole bit. Now, let's see if I can move my little.
Mariah, can I ask a question from the
Please.
chat?
Yeah.
Bonnie asked if you have any experiences you want to share about virtual or blended learning opportunities. Many of our students really love it, love that option.
Yes, absolutely. So okay, yes, please, this is very unprofessional, but my cat is scratching at the door. Sorry. So we have been working, we started on Zoom the same time as everybody else, I think. And at first it was just incredibly overwhelming, especially with, you know, newcomers that don't always have internet at home or the means to pay for it. And I just, honestly, you know, I had my class online and I was struggling to figure out how to do all of it. I thought, this is a nightmare. But really what I think has happened since then is that our teachers have become educated. The students are learning very quickly how to utilize their phones and the systems. And I think most importantly, folks that run the show, you know, provide the funds, are realizing that we have gaps in our community, whether you're a newcomer or a refugee, or just a person who can't afford to pay their bills. And this is an issue. This is an issue for connection, and this is an issue for access to so many things, healthcare, education. So what I have seen is that this has improved a tremendous amount. In my experience, our teachers, I mean, there's a woman who I adore, and she was my mentor when I started at the community college, and she took me under her wing. She had already retired from teaching K-12. And when she started with us, we were doing in person, and then like 6 months in, COVID started. And she will admit she is not tech savvy at all. But today she is running an online Zoom class for her ESOL students, and she is having a blast. And she's doing, you know, we have purchased curriculum, like textbooks that have easy access to online. And I would love to hear what everybody else is doing. We're also doing Boxy, and we hired a digital literacy person who's running that whole program with us. And it's going so much better. I think when we all realized that we could do it, do I think that it is, you know, if we're not talking about K-12, you know, it's not for everyone, but I don't know how all of you feel. I just feel like it's gone much better. And we've just expanded. There's lots of cool programs out there that you don't even have to purchase, like Flipgrid. And, you know, I had a lot of fun with that, making videos and making connections with the students, you know, in addition to all of the other programs that we're all using for vocabulary and lessons and the videos that are available. And that part of it's fun. And then to see that the students are learning those skills is also tremendous. You know, we, in our emergent class, where they would traditionally be learning more about like holding a pencil and writing, they're learning how to log onto a computer, and they can mute themselves and unmute themselves. Like that is a huge growth. That is tremendous growth. The fact that they would even get into this weird box and turn it on and click these buttons. I mean, the capacity and the capability of humans to learn is amazing. And we've also learned that it's okay if we can't. If you put a rock in the stream figures out a way around it. And I think that is true for education. We just can't have too many rocks, and we can't just leave them there and do nothing about it. You know, we have to try to help, but. I'm just looking at the chat now. I'm terrible. Should I take a look at it? We're virtual and it's working out perfectly.
There was only one other question that I missed early on, and it was, what is the term for an individual pre-refugee?
They are forcibly displaced.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good question. They're forcibly displaced, and they could be internally displaced within their own country. So if something happened here in Michigan and I ran to Ohio, I will never be a refugee. But if I left Michigan and went to Canada, which, you know, we would be considered refugees then if we pleaded our case. If I went to Canada and I asked them to give me safe harbor, I would be an asylee. To put that into terms that might make a little bit more sense. So, but if I went to Canada and I was hoping, you know, I couldn't stay at Canada, it's not the best example. But if, you know, if I had run to Canada and I was going to need to find safety in, you know, Tanzania, then I would be, and I applied, I would be a refugee because I'm in another country and I'll get placed in a different country, a third country. To get back to this idea of online, I agree. I think that for some people, it has allowed them to participate in classes. So when we opened back up to in-person, it was really in a quick response. We had already been thinking about it, but it was in a quick response to the Afghan situation. And because we knew they weren't going to have computers and they just didn't have any of that. And they've been sitting in the military bases for a while, and it was time to get them engaged. So we started these programs. And I thought, you know, there were people who for a long time were saying, you know, I don't like the online classes. I don't like this. I want to do in person. And that was for the first year, 90% of the students were like, yeah, if you did in person, I would totally come back. But what has happened is that some of those folks, once they figured out some of the technology thing, they were like, no, you know, I have needy kids at home. I have kids that need special care. It was very difficult for me to come out before. Now I can do both. People who are saying, you know, I'd rather just stay in my home for a variety of reasons. And so they attend, and they wouldn't be able to attend if we had in-person classes now. And transportation, you know, I'm not gonna, this isn't the place to get on my soapbox here, but we have transportation issues more so than ever because of a shortage of drivers. And there's a whole slew of reasons at this time why it's difficult for people to travel to class. And online provides an opportunity for folks to do it from their home. It does generally for us require more intense service because we have to go to their home and negotiate the problems they're having with their internet and call Comcast and you know, all that stuff. But it's okay.
There's a couple more questions in the chat.
Okay.
Oh, and it just disappeared. Okay. It keeps moving. How successful are the asylees to gain access to the U.S. if they do not enter the correct port of entry?
Oh, you know, that's a question that is beyond my reach and scope. It depends a lot on what their case was and how well how they can prove it, and the judge that they get, honestly, from anything I've seen. I think the Michigan Immigrants' Rights council would be the best people to ask that question to, and they can give you a more complete answer. I don't want to speak to something I don't know. But if you look at that definition, it does require proof. And I can tell you from my conversations with, refugee community, neighbors and friends that proving it's less than 1% of refugees become resettled. It's hard. If you flee a situation, you don't always have all your documentation. And how do you prove that this is happening to you, or it was intended to happen to you, or that this even happened? So it's a really hard thing to do. But again, I would talk to the official folks on that. Great question though.
And then another one was, what were the 4 words that were used to describe the different refugees, immigrants, and the 2 other?
Yeah. So we have, the forced migration, and then you have refugee and asylee, and then I also put up migrant and immigrant in there. Is that what you're talking about? You want me to go back to that slide?
I'm sure it was Sharon's question. I think that answered it. She said, sure, if you could go back to the slide.
All right. To review, I'm just kidding. Wouldn't you all be so excited about that at this point in the afternoon? Okay. Keep going. I'm pretty sure that it's the forced migration, immigrant, refugee, migrant, and refugee and asylee. Is that what you needed?
I think that's the slide.
Okay.
She said yes. Okay,
good. Yes, so when I was growing up, we always heard about how, this is a nation of immigrants, and a lot of our family came over, like so many others, through Ellis Island, and that is a term where immigrant comes from. But there wasn't, at the time that my family was coming over, there wasn't this idea of refugee. And immigrant and refugee are different. You can be an immigrant that comes here for school. You can be here on a visa. You can be here for a job. And even if that situation before you came here was miserable, you're not a refugee unless you're given that determination by law here, the United States. If you're a refugee, you have rights and you have access to things. You get a permanent resident card, you have a social security number, you have a work authorization when you're admitted into this country. So that means that if somebody needs a job, if they come over as a refugee, you can connect that they're employable. They are just employable. They have that ability. If you come over as an immigrant and you extend and stay over your visa, you can't work necessarily. And people that are here right now from Afghanistan are in a precarious situation. So I bring that up because unless DC decides to change some of their policies, the folks that came here, they have to apply for asylum. All of those folks have to apply for asylum. They're here temporarily. So they were given some things, like they can work. Not all of them, but the ones who have been able to pass that threshold can work, but they're not a permanent citizen. They're going to have to apply for asylum, and that requires an attorney, and it requires language skills. And so when we're teaching these students, I have to expect in my classroom that they're not going to be there the whole time, that they're going to have appointments with their lawyers. That's, of course, please go. What can I do to help you get there? We don't fill out legal paperwork at all. We make that very clear, but we will refer you to whatever attorneys are available. We make sure that we're just a liaison. So you go here, you go here, you go here, you go here. We know where you should go, and we know the people in those areas. That's really important as educators. I take some of that responsibility off our instructors, so that, when they get asked those questions, they say, go see Mariah. And then I, will connect them, or somebody like me will connect them in that direction, but we don't do it for them because we're not lawyers,
What about, is it illegal to overstay your visa?
That's a law question. So again, I can't answer that question. I think it's case by case. It gets handled differently. But you would definitely want to see your lawyer. If you've overstayed your visa and you want to be here legally, please go see an attorney.
Did you want to go to that discussion part that you said to say to the end?
Yeah, I would like to. I'm just gonna hop through these very quickly, and there were a couple other things that I wanted to mention before we move on. So food scarcity. So I don't know what is happening here. Oh yeah, so this is the Afghan Arrivals. And I feel like my slides are kind of repeating here, but I don't know why. I think I went too fast. I guess I just wanted to let you all know that if you're interested in supporting, we do have a Roomga, which is a place where we're collecting donations for individuals. So this is also a helpful tip if you're working with newcomers and you find that you're supplying coats and jackets in big bunches, or people want to donate and you don't have room for the items that they want to donate. This happens to us a lot. We do have tables and extra jackets, but we've learned of this program called a Roomga. It's ROONGA. And you can go and claim a family. And we will, if a new family comes in and they're in housing, we'll ask them their sizes, what they need, pants, shirts, work jacket, ties, anything for the home. And then we put it up on the site and people claim it. And we have right now, because of the Afghans that have come in, I think we had just posted 78 new families up there. So it's been a really successful way to get donations in and to get them back out to the families themselves. And I just wanted to share that with you because we do have more people who are who have asked for some assistance, and yes, have asked for assistance, and we don't have those items yet. So we really are hoping to get them in and completed. And then also we have our fundraiser, which is coming up. It's our 20-year celebration, which is May 10th. So I wanted to share that with you as well. It's on our website, so keep that in mind. But I would love to go to those questions as well. So when you think about English as teachers and working with newcomers, how do you feel about English in your classroom? How do you feel about other languages in your classroom? How do you manage that? Feel free to put your answer in the chat or raise your hand. Whitney says it's great if there's more than one student, but I feel bad if there's one I can't communicate well. Yes. Yeah, I agree. We, run into that sometimes too, especially with the large number of Afghans that have arrived, that we have mostly Dari, or mostly Pashto, and then we'll have a few Dari speakers, or we'll have, a Sudanese student in there. So that's, we try to manage that and limit that as well. This is great. Yeah, my mom still has a green card. Is she a migrant? No, if she has a green card, she's a permanent resident. So that means she's what the United States considers to be on her pathway to citizenship. So after 5 years, she can apply for citizenship if she has a green card.
It's been about 45. I'm just saying.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, no responses? It's okay.
There was one more.
Oh, sorry.
She just said if a student doesn't understand what I'm saying, it's always great to have someone interpret. In the classroom is usually the only place students speak English. They speak their language at home.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, I tend to agree. We use it. I usually tell the class, you know, it's okay if it's an explanation, if another student doesn't understand. We also, you know, work with a large number of volunteers in our classroom, not as many right now because of COVID policies, but we have. And so we will frequently get volunteers that speak, you know, the primary language of the student. And so we have had to say multiple times, like, for developing a relationship and creating, you know, a connection, it's okay, but you're not a living walking interpreter. You're not a living walking dictionary, a translation dictionary. So we do try to use English, but one of the things that my connection with some of the researchers at MSU is to talk about how allowing for bilingualism in a classroom, if it's not isolating other students, is actually a way to create a concept that students are respected and valued. And I that's one of the areas that I always kind of try to balance. So that's why I was asking you that question, because I think that there's other ways of doing that. But I also have, you know, found that when I started allowing it more in my classroom, that as long as I said this must happen, you know, during the breaks or when it's an explanation, but it cannot be during instructional time. It cannot be disruptive to other students. You have to be inclusive at your tables. That has helped a little bit. Well, a lot really. But I think as language teachers, it's an interesting area, you know.
There's one more person that said Google Translate can be really helpful if you have no other means of communicating. But we are actually out of time. So I think we're gonna have to cut off here. But thank you so much, Mariah, for sharing. This is just a wealth of knowledge. And we really appreciate you sharing with MACAE. Just a reminder to everybody, the presentation materials will be available and you can go back and watch the recording too. Don't forget that tonight is Family Feud. So I hope to see you all there. And I hope you have a nice dinner between now and then. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.